All right, so last week we looked at, and I'm having us look at structure and the importance of structure. Last week we looked at culture and culture creep and going away from the organizational culture. This week I want us to look at, I think, well, I don't want to say it's more important, but a little bit more of the nuts and bolts. It's a little more quantitative than culture is. Policies and procedures. So since they're written down, and really we know what we're supposed to do, but we also need to look at reasons why we go outside of that. And reasons are a big word, and we're going to talk about that. But again, just to rehash some stuff, structure, I like using it as a verb, which is construct or arrange according to a plan. Give a pattern or organization to keep things, have a plan to keep things organized. We know what it's like to function in disarray, let's say, dysfunction. Sometimes that's expected even, but we need to try to mitigate the risk of living in disarray, let's say, to living in chaos. We don't want to be there. We want to have structure so that we can maintain order. Maintain order. So structure is the what of organization. The structure is what we need to look at. Organizational structure determines how the roles, power, and responsibilities are assigned, controlled, and coordinated, and how information flows between the different levels of management. Structure depends on the organization's objectives and strategies. We know what our overall objective is to help others. So that's really a lot of what we looked at with our culture. But we have to have a strategy for that. You know, when I sit down and I explain to people, like I did yesterday, this woman, I was explaining the program and how we're 100% funded through the collection process and resale of donated goods. Well, there's a lot to that. There's a whole lot to that. And, you know, I pray every day, God, give me what I need to get through this day, to keep everything moving. And I think faith has a lot to do with it, but we have to do our part. And our part is following the policies and procedures that are put in place so that we might, that's the strategy, so that we might be able to reach our objective, which is to help others. So again, and I mentioned this last week, because of the size of our organization, our structure is what's considered a centralized structure. The top layer of management has most of the decision making. Most, if not close to all, most of the decision making. Now, they're not in your store in the morning when somebody doesn't show up. So you're going to have to make some decisions, and we're going to talk about that. But reasons. The top layer of management is for decision making and has a tight control over departments, divisions, and divisions. This is considered a hierarchy system. And again, the Salvation Army falls under a centralized structure model because our policies and procedures are not made up in my office or Alan's office. They're made up at headquarters. Right? All right, so the why, again, without structure there is chaos. We don't want chaos. We got to deal with it enough, right? So we don't want chaos. We want order. And if we're able to stay within that structure, we have order. And if we, for some reason, find ourselves drifting out of that structure, then we need to look at the reason and make changes so that we can come back in. So again, organizational structure, you have chain of command, you have policy and procedure and culture, and we looked at culture last week. So today we're looking at policy and procedure. Company's policies and procedures establish the rules of conduct within an organization outlining the responsibility of both employees and employers. Company policies and procedures are in place to protect the rights of workers as well as the business interests of employers. All right, so now that we've gone over our review from last month, let's use one example that's come up recently. If I say resource management, do you know what I'm talking about? We have to manage resources, right? Any business, it's basic business. Whether you're a small business, a mom and pop, or a large organization, resource management is one of the most basic elements to a structure. And we have policies and procedures somewhat from headquarters, but again, it's just basic. Oh, wait. I wanted to get past that one. Now we'll stay there. It's basic. So recently, now we've started a way of handling our resources. Now, donations, it's a little harder, right? If after we've processed something and we send it to the store, there should be management to that resource as well. And you have, what are the papers filled out with what you're receiving?
Oh, manifest.
Manifest. So you have manifest. And I know even within manifest we work outside of that, because are all of the items that come to your store recorded? Not all the time, right? So, you know, you might want to get a little bit better on that so you know what you have in your store, we know what we're producing. But when it comes to supplies, there should be no reason why we don't handle them and manage them properly, right? Which includes an inventory. We haven't even had an inventory. I don't know. Have you ever used an inventory for your resources when it comes to supplies? It's basic. So we're able to institute that. Again, there's just little things that are really policies and procedures that any organization has in place, let alone the ones that we get prescribed from headquarters. So structure, okay? Structure is a boat in the ocean. Policies and procedures can be seen as what maintains that structure. So without those policies and procedures, we sink. Right? About 8 months ago, when we first started having these meetings, I gave you all copies of the Guide for Thrift Store Operation, right? I asked you to bring them. I don't know if everybody has them. That's okay. From here on out, we're going to talk about that. The policies and procedures are written in our Guide for Thrift Store Operation. So here, let's look at a couple. You got 3. All right, so look right here on page 1. Okay, it just gives us a little summary. The information contained in this manual is designed as a guide for the operation of your store. The policies, procedures, and ideas shared have been adapted from the experience of the Salvation Army Thrift Stores personnel and other successful organizations. When put into practice, they will ensure the safe, successful operation of your store and ultimately the success of the Adult Rehabilitation Center. And then right under that you see in the scope and responsibility for store supervisors and managers, using these guidelines in the operation of their store. Instruct all employees regarding the store procedures. Holding store employees accountable for the use of these guidelines. Creating an environment where employees are encouraged to do their best and to meet the needs of our customers. Balancing the needs of our customers and our beneficiaries to achieve the financial and program goals of the organization. And there's other things that I got tabs in here, and we could touch on them, but there are things in here. Material handling, well, we just talked about resource management. There's some issues there, and it's not just at your stores, it's with the drivers and when it comes back to the warehouse and how it's handled. So there's a lot of things that I've seen over the past year that are practices that are outside of Salvation Army's policies and procedures. And I've heard a lot of reasons why. Some are reasons, and some are excuses. But you're going to learn from me today how I see the two.
I want to tell you the difference between a reason and an excuse. Sometimes they feel like they're almost the same, but they're a little bit different. And the difference in them is that a reason is when you take personal ownership about something. An excuse is when it's external. So let me give you an example. If you're somebody who always shows up late to events, and people ask me, why are you late? What happened? Well, the streetcar was late, the bus didn't come on time, the subway was delayed. That is an excuse. It's not a reason. Because the reason, if you were to take personal ownership about that, it would sound like this. Actually, what happened was, I didn't allow myself enough time to allow for any inconveniences or something that may have happened. And they can also get a little bit trickier. You know, somebody may say, well, you know, I don't have enough money to achieve this thing. That could be a reason, or it could be an excuse. Let me tell you the difference. The reason could be, it might be true, perfectly good, legitimate reasons. I don't have enough money. But maybe in this excuse, and it's an excuse in this way, which could be, is that maybe they've actually chosen, like their priorities for spending money have been completely different. So I want to remember, a reason is when you take personal ownership. And when you take personal ownership, you can change it.
Okay, now that we've seen that video and it's explained to us the difference, I will tell you this, that I see no difference, personally. If I'm looking at something and I am for some reason outside of, in this case, policies and procedures, I need to identify that reason and make changes, right? It's up to me as the administrator, it's up to Alan as the store supervisor, and it's up to you as the manager when you see, and even when it's a legitimate reason that we have, if we want to keep the doors open, we're going to have to do some stuff to keep the doors open. But we have to look at why we ended up doing that. If it's outside of policy and procedure, we have to take a look at that and then come up with a plan so that we can get things back in line. So reasons and excuses, I look at them as both the same. They both require what I call course correction. Remember that? We came up with that little saying months ago when we were looking at the 1-minute manager information. We need to make course corrections. So, moving forward, I will consider everything a reason. I'll give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I'm not looking to point fingers at anybody. I know I hear a lot of reasons, and I'll call them all reasons. Even when I know they're an excuse, we'll call them all reasons. We just heard from that fellow that a reason, right, is something that you take ownership of. An excuse is when you put blame or you point at somebody else and say it's God or something else. Let's look at everything as a reason. There's a reason why we work outside of that which we are supposed to, right? The Salvation Army's policies and procedures. We have to identify the reason and make changes to bring us back into compliance. A course correction to get us into compliance. We can't continue down the wrong path, the wrong road. Even if the wrong road keeps us, the doors open, we have to recognize the problem and make changes. If someone comes in off the street and asks me for a pair of shoes, if somebody comes in and asks me for a coat, if somebody comes into your store, and hopefully you're able to take care of this, you as the manager, if you see an immediate need like that, if somebody's coming in and they got socks on and it's cold outside, you're going to give them a pair of shoes, right? right? But we have to find out. And it's not your responsibility as the manager, but you need to be able to direct somebody to someone that can help them. Because in my case, as the administrator, if somebody shows me a need, I have to then find out, at least try to find out why that need is there. Because am I truly helping the person if I give him shoes and send him on his way? Because what is going to happen when those shoes wear out? He's going to need to come back and ask for another pair of shoes. I want to get a person to a point where they're able to purchase their own shoes. So when somebody comes in and asks me for shoes, I'm going to meet the immediate need. And I understand that you have to do the same thing at your store. But we have to recognize or try to come up with the reason why that happened so that we can make the changes that need to be made. We make the decision to do what needs to happen at the moment, but then I need to help the person, again in this case, make the necessary changes so that they can get their life back on track. And again, I understand that in your daily operations, you as the manager, and I appreciate this, that you're able to think on your feet and make decisions. It's necessary. But I also then need you as the manager and as a store supervisor to look at the problem and try to come up with a solution. We cannot continue to go in the wrong direction. As a manager, you must be able to understand the reason and make plans to mitigate the risk of the future, for the future, so that it doesn't continue. Mitigate is just to recognize and mitigate, which is to change, to make sure, to ensure that it's not recognized, that it doesn't come to, if I see a hole in a parking lot and it's right where everybody walks, I'm going to fill that hole. I'm going to fix that problem. I'm going to mitigate the risk of somebody tripping in that hole. So we have to make sure that when we recognize something, again, where we are working outside of policies and procedures, that we try to come up with a plan to fix, right? To fix. If we let it continue, it becomes the norm. And this is easier recognized when it comes to things that are quantitative, like production. But allowing things to happen throws policies, procedures, production standards, staffing patterns, store layouts, everything, whatever it is, it's throwing this thing out the window, the handbook. Because if it's stated in there, then that's what we're supposed to be following. And if we're not following that, then we have to figure out why, so that we can get back on track. Everything you allow to happen on a regular basis becomes your standard, and not the Salvation Army. One of the things, and again, for some reason when I was thinking about this, I just wrote East Stroudsburg. It has nothing to do with each and every one of your stores, so I'll say Tunkhannock. We do not have a Tunkhannock family store. We have a Salvation Army family store in Tunkhannock. And it's the same thing for every area. Now I know that there's a little, let's say, a little different flavor in each store. But we still are one. All right? These are Salvation Army family stores. It's Salvation Army policy and procedure. This is basic organizational structure in any business, no matter what size it is. There has to be centralized policies and procedures, especially when a business is the size of ours. Again, I understand the reasons, but reasons must give us an understanding of a problem so that we can fix the problem. You see, I'm probably a couple pages ahead now. Not that far. look at an example. Right here. Right? If you can't hang your daily minimum standard, the reason, again, might be somebody's called off sick. But if that same person calls off sick over and over again, and you continue to hang below standard, right, you have to fix the problem. We have to find out why, and if that person's not able to come in, then we have to let that person go and replace that person so that we can continue to hang minimum standards. And again, there could be a number of reasons, but you still have to make necessary changes to make sure that we can pull things back in and follow policies and procedures. Reasons are a good thing. And again, I don't care. I'm not going to say everything's an excuse because I know some people look at things that way. I'm looking at them as reasons. Either way, it doesn't matter. They all require course correction. Everything that we do that is not in line with our policies and procedures is the same. It needs to be fixed. There may be a reason, but it's our job to rebuild the structure before we sink. We must always make the necessary changes so we can get back on track. As you run your store each day. So, policies and procedures. Remember this. Company policies and procedures establish the rules of conduct within an organization outlining the responsibilities of both employees and employers. Company policies and procedures are in place to protect the rights of workers as well as the business interests of the employers. This is, again, basic organizational structure, basic in any business, and something as simple as resource management and procurement. It's another big word for purchaser. So we have somebody to procure our resources. We have now a system to maintain, to make sure that we're not wasting resources. All basic. In your store, you deal with this stuff every day. Employees calling sick, whatever that might be. We have to make sure that we're looking at the rules as prescribed. We are trying each day to live within them. And when we don't, I'm not saying if, when we don't, we have to come up with a plan to fix the problem. We have to look at the issue, look at the situation, and make the necessary changes so that we can get back on track. Before, see, I'm using track and boat and all these things. Get back on track before we completely go off course. Right? It's structure over chaos. I choose structure.